live streaming. You can begin.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Economic Recovery Task Force meeting of Tuesday, September 22nd. I can see we have a quorum where people are freezing in and out, but we seem to have everybody back. So we'll call the meeting to order. I'll ask for a motion of the adoption of the agenda, please. Jill, moved by Jill, seconded by Councillor O'Reilly. Thank you. Anyone opposed to that motion? Okay, we'll consider it passed. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest in anything on today's agenda for anyone? Seeing none. Adoption of the minutes, the draft minutes from September 1st, 2020 Economic Recovery Task Force meeting. If you've had a chance to glance at those, is there any omissions, any errors? Anyone want to move the minutes of the last meeting who was present? Anybody will do. Tom, thank you. Moved by Tom, seconded by Councillor O'Reilly. Anyone opposed? Okay, we'll consider the minutes passed or endorsed. We have item 6. We have a deputation. Jen, or is our deputation online, or are we waiting to bring them in?
I never heard from Mike Perry, and Rebecca, I don't know if you did as well.
Did we get them a Zoom link for a
Yeah,
deputation?
it was sent out Friday afternoon to him.
Okay, so I'll just ask if Dennis Geelan or Jolie Benz is on the line anywhere regarding a deputation. Speak up. Hearing nothing, we'll move on to our item 7, which is our focus area infrastructure stimulus. At just 7.1, I wanted to give you an update. We had a discussion, a recommendation went to council regarding a couple of infrastructure projects for downtown. One was phase 3 of the Lindsay downtown, continuing from William over to Victoria next year to keep going with that project. And the other one was the Fenelon Falls downtown reconstruction to be considered by council in the 2021 budget. I just want to update the task force that at our council meeting, I don't know, last week, 2 weeks ago, that council approved the early start project for the phase 3 of the Lindsay downtown. So the rationale for that is the tenders will go out in the fall, and Juan can correct me if I'm wrong, but that they want to get started as quick as they can in the new year with the goal of having as much of the Lindsay downtown completed late spring, early summer, the same as they did for phase 2 this year. So that's the rationale for the early start approval. They didn't ask for an early start approval on Fenelon Falls. We'll see if that comes forward in the budget, but I think the rationale there is that would be an after summer start project. So there was no need to get an early start approval because our council budget this year won't be approved till end of February or beginning of March. So we wanted to get that project on the books and started as soon as possible. So just an update on the early start. Is there any questions on that from anyone? It's good news. It was, I think, an $11 million total reconstruction, $6 million water surface, and then water and wastewater was about $5 million cleaning up the infrastructure under the ground. So that'll take it all the way to Victoria and I think part of Cambridge Street as well. So that'll be the majority of our downtown on the books and ready to go for next year. So good news there. I just wanted to ask Director Rojas if item 7.2, if he had any update, he could just give us a quick update on infrastructure projects that are coming forward in the base budget for 2021. Not the list of what's shovel ready. We've already had that list, but what are we, roads and bridges and infrastructure, if you could just give us a quick overview of some of those projects that might be coming forward in 2021. Obviously, they're just coming forward for council's consideration, but do you have anything you can update us on there, Juan?
Thanks, Andy. So we do have a draft, a first draft of our 2021 proposed capital budget. It hasn't made public yet. It hasn't been made public yet, and I don't think council has seen it, but high level bridges we're proposing to spend just over $3 million on bridges, $11.4 million on reconstruction. So that 11.4 million does not include the underground infrastructure. That's in the water wastewater budget. So I'm just giving you the general tax levy. And resurfacing is around 10 million and about 1.7 in gravel resurfacing. At a high level, I'm not sure how much you want me to dive in. I do have the specific projects that make up those amounts. But again, that hasn't been made public yet, but if the mayor is okay, I'm willing to share as much as information as you guys want.
What does the task force want? Do you need anything more, or, I mean, are you looking for more information? I just kind of wanted an update on some of the projects, but I guess if council hasn't seen it, hasn't been made public yet, we probably shouldn't be getting people's hopes up before we go there. Councilor O'Reilly?
Well, I was just wondering, would there be any advantage of us seeing them? So perhaps we could, are you looking for a recommendation, or is it just for receiving an information?
Just looking for information. I mean, we're just trying to, come up with what are some of our infrastructure projects, and just to sort of give the task force an idea of what we're looking to, bring forward from an infrastructure proposal for next year. I know the Lindsay downtown, I don't know if, it's a recommended budget at this point, and council can do what they want with it, but I'm not sure how much detail we should be going into at this point. I'm not sure if that information is helpful to the task force or not. How does that relate to previous years, Juan? I mean, are we spending more? Are we spending less? Are we spending about the same from a budget perspective on infrastructure?
We're spending, it's more. So again, this is the first draft, so it's more than what the approved budget for 2020 was. I would imagine some of these projects, I'm not saying the roads, but some of the capital projects citywide, I would imagine would have to be discussed in order to get it to our general tax rate increase, whatever that target is. So it's really early, but again, the first draft is always high, and then we whittle down depending on what council's priority is and what the acceptable tax limit would be. So those are the two unknowns, right? I think we have a target tax increase or minimal tax increase, but it really depends on those two factors.
Yeah, our long-term financial plan, I think, targets a tax increase at 3% or 3.25%, something like that. So that'll be the target base budget that we'll be asking, staff to come forward with. So I guess as an early draft, that's just an idea of some numbers. So I'm fine with that for now. Is there anybody looking for more information? We don't want to get into too much detail, because a lot of these projects, like Juan says, might be, have to be cut at some point to sort of hit the target. The first draft is always, we tend to see first drafts coming in considerably higher than what the target is. So then they have to sort of adjust from there. So is there any questions on that? I'm not sure how helpful that was to the task force, but thanks, Juan. I appreciate that. Okay. Let's move down to focus area 2 then. Is there just before I go, is there any other questions on infrastructure? Anything anybody's curious about, or? Okay. We'll move down to item 8, which is development approvals. I know Bjorn's been working with staff on a spreadsheet and the concierge concept. A spreadsheet was sent out early this morning. Spreadsheets are spreadsheets. They're kind of hard to get your head around because you can only see a piece of it at a time. But for anybody who's motivated like I am, I printed off all the sheets and taped them all together, and I have a big billboard of all these projects. So I'll turn it over to Bjorn just to give us to see if this is what he was, where I know he's working with Chris and Richard on putting this together. So go ahead, Bjorn.
Thank you, Andy. Yes, we do have a spreadsheet that is mostly complete from what I understand. I heard that one of the planners have been on holiday, so there are a few applications not on there. I think it is giving us a fair overview of what is at the planning department, and I would like Richard or Chris to speak to this in a moment, how they feel about the spreadsheet, what it's giving them, and how likely we are to be able to keep it up to date and keep it useful at all times. Right now, we have also in conjunction with this, started the concierge program. I think we're kind of out of the gate, and I think the best one to speak on that is actually Rebecca. So if Rebecca want to start with the concierge program and give us an update on that, I think that would be the best. And then if Richard and Chris can speak to the spreadsheet and, you know, how they feel about it right now, I think that's the best way forward.
Okay, good morning. So the concierge program has been set up. It's going to start by looking at site plans. So using the spreadsheet, the recent site plan applications, and Emily Turner, who's on our economic development team, is acting as the concierge. Can you hear me okay? Yep, okay. She's going to be tracking with the applicants as they go through the development process. So the point of this is to act as a facilitator and works alongside our planning team to help get these applications over the line. So I think that we should be able to give a good update at the next task force meeting to how that's going. The idea of it is that it will be a 9-month pilot program so that we can get up and running, work on it, and then take a really good review to see what's working and how we can systematically improve what we're doing.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I think there's a few people that are not on mute, and maybe that's part of the background noise. There was a little bit of noise when you were talking. So if everybody would just mute themselves, I think it's easier to hear the ones that are speaking. Richard or Chris, which one of you want to say a couple words about the spreadsheet and how you feel about where it is now and what you may want to use it for going forward?
Sure. So I took a look at the spreadsheet. I think it's pretty much up to date with everything that we have in terms of active applications. I took a look at it yesterday, and it definitely has everything on it that I'm aware of that's current and that we're working on right now. I think there might be a couple of outliers here and there, but I don't think that's really going to change things a whole lot. You know, it's taken quite a bit of time to get here, but I think to keep it up to date is going to be easier because keeping it up to date with new files is going to be easier because you're going in as you're hitting all those different milestones. So I think that will be the easier part. Obviously, as projects are finished, they'll probably come off the spreadsheet, or they'll just be noted as completed. But I think the spreadsheet is pretty good. It's pretty thorough. So I think it'll be a useful tool. I know for me, especially for the consents and the variances, that's where we're getting a lot of requests right now to, you know, move consents up ahead or variances up ahead. But having this information gives me a very quick idea of what's actually been requested by people and where it's at in the process. So for that, it's quite helpful from that perspective. So if anybody has any questions on the spreadsheet, or if you've taken a look at it, or if you'd like to ask anything, I'm open for questions. Chris, I don't know, is there anything else you'd like to add on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great for what it is right now, but I think the key is for staff to continue to use it. And I can see it would be easy to, forget about it, and life goes on and the staff's busy and they forget about adding the new ones as they come up. So it's a snapshot in time unless it gets, people keep adding to it. So I think the key is to just keep on top of staff to keep it up to date, because it's not any good to us if it just slowly kind of becomes a historic document that isn't up to date. So Richard, I'll leave that to you to crack the whip and make sure that people are continuing to keep it up to date, because that's the key.
So I'm just wondering, thank you for that. And I can tell a lot of work's gone into it. I noticed there are some applications not on there, and I guess I'm wondering, when can we expect, a Port 32 is one, for instance. I know they've had some different submissions. I don't see that anywhere on the list. I don't know the other one in Bob Cajun. I don't see it on there. The one we've been talking about, Richard, with the best homes, I guess, is it on there? But I don't see Port 32, and I know they've made a couple of different submissions. So I don't know if that's somebody being away or if that's just somebody, I don't know how we make sure we get them all on there. I mean, and I guess the big thing is how do we ensure, certainly from my perspective, we don't want to go to all this work, to Chris's point, and let this fall by the wayside and not keep it up. So is there any thoughts on how can we make sure, rather than suggesting Richard stop in and see every planner every day and say, don't forget your spreadsheet, but what do you think about some kind of update to the planning committee every month? Maybe an updated spreadsheet can be brought forward to the planning committee each month, and that can be our first item on the agenda at planning, and it's an update of the spreadsheet. We can have a discussion, any questions on anything on the spreadsheet before we get into the agenda, and maybe that gives us a touch point each month to ensure that things are changing and staff are keeping it up to date and going from there. And I see the thumbs up from Chris, so I think I would personally think that might be a good recommendation to make that we can take forward. But what do you think, Richard?
I think, as I say, I think, yes, I mean, we can certainly take it to Planning Advisory Committee. I'm not sure, are you looking for a report with that, or is it just as under other business? Maybe it goes under other business at the end of the public meetings.
Yeah, I agree. Wherever we put it, I'm not looking for a report. I'm not looking for somebody to sit down and write a complete update on what's changed. I think that'll be up to the committee. Here's your last month's spreadsheet. Here's this month's spreadsheet. If anybody has any questions, we can do it as other business. And it's really just a touch point, for council and the planning committee to sort of see what's in the pipe, what's coming forward, why is this one got a 6 months lag, a lag before it's come forward. And then there can be an explanation brought forward and just sort of that overview, I think, that we're all looking for, but I think gives us a good touch point. But no, I wouldn't be expecting a full report or anything, just really up to the committee to look at it and see if they have any questions going forward, and a touch point for your staff. So go ahead, Bjorn.
I just want to say too, in terms of keeping it up to date, it shouldn't be a matter of workload that's stopping them. It's more like if they forget about it, because all they have to do is to mark, once it's in there, entering the application initially, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, I'm thinking, no more per application to enter them. And then it's only when it hits milestones that you type in a date, which is a matter of, very short time. So I think it's more a matter of reminding them, getting into the routine that they update maybe at the end of every day as the last thing they do, just so that it is as up to date as possible.
Yeah, and we can certainly, as a committee, we're not looking to go down the list, Richard, and put you on the spot with why isn't this one done? Why isn't this one moving forward? I think the committee will have to take some responsibility to look at it ahead of time, and if there's any questions, maybe get them ahead, get them out to you and your staff before the meeting, so that you've got time to, where's this one? Why is this one stalled, for instance? Or, where's this one in the process? And then it gives, rather than trying to put you on the spot at the meeting. So if we get it ahead of time, like we usually do with our agenda, then I think, we'll try to work with you to keep it moving forward, if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
Sure, no, that's fine. Yep.
Okay, Bjorn, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think you hit it on the head there too, when you said you're not going to use that spreadsheet as another tool to make life miserable for the planners. There's no easier way to get them turned off, from working on a project. Right now, I think we have pretty good agreement in the group between economic development and planning and building. Everybody seems to be on the same page. Let's keep it positive.
No, I agree. No, and absolutely, it's not a tool to, you know, why isn't this going here? Why isn't that going there? I think it's just, we're all looking for, you know, accountability and information and, you know, to see things moving forward. And, you know, I think it's a good reminder for everybody. And if counselors have a question with the spreadsheet, they can, you know, they can ask somebody on the committee or send it through to staff to say where, you know, where is this in the process? But I think it's a good, as Chris said, a good snapshot in time that if somebody's curious about something, there's a lot of information there, you know, that we can dive into. Pat, you had a question? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to give you a motion if you want a motion, Mr. Mayor, or or do you want to just leave it as is? I'm good with either or.
Yeah, no, we can do a motion. Let's just see if there's any other questions first,
Okay.
Pat, just from a discussion perspective. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking that it might be useful as well to have maybe at the bottom of the spreadsheet or as a separate page, some of the policy work that the planning department's working on as well. So, you know, the zoning bylaw consolidation, you know, have it sitting as a, you know, where we at with that, and the growth management study, or, you know, any of the policy work that we're doing, or major projects that the planning department's doing, and have them kind of a brief explanation of where we're at in the process with them as well. It might be useful so that you can not just see the applications, but also see where some of the other planning work's at. And that can be part of that submission to the committee.
That gives Richard, does that give Richard something to do? Because I think he's looking for stuff to do these days. And is that okay, Richard? Are you okay with that? Is my sarcasm coming through?
Loud and clear, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Yeah, we'd have to create another tab for other projects to put all those different things in there. Yeah, it'd be all the policy work, zoning bylaw update, all the special projects like cannabis, things like that. We'd have to do something like that. All the board, the tribunal work that we're doing. That's I mean, that's going to take us probably another couple weeks to get all that stuff in there. So.
Okay, well, that's, you know, that wasn't sort of the original focus of what we were trying to do with planning applications from an economic recovery perspective. But I think, you know, to Chris's point, for information, if we're sort of keeping on top of where everything is, then, you know, whether that's part of this and it's done quarterly as opposed to, you know, every month, because policy obviously takes a little longer than some of these applications. You know, let's just keep that. What does the committee think about that? Let's just keep that as a separate issue. And if we can get maybe a quarterly update on where we are on the policy, doesn't necessarily have to be part of the spreadsheet, and that can come forward with the spreadsheet once a quarter or something to the planning committee, then I think, you know, that gives us a pretty good overview of a lot of information. But we do want to make sure we don't want to take away from the spreadsheet and the applications and moving these forward. So does anybody object to that? Okay. Is there any other questions from anybody regarding the spreadsheet? Okay. I guess, Pat, do you want to make a recommendation that we, I guess, Richard, the only other question I had was, how do we, I mean, there are a few missing. Can we, I guess the next planning meeting, can we expect, it's got to go to council and everything, so we won't worry about it for the next planning meeting in October, but can we maybe target having a complete spreadsheet, as complete as possible for the next task force meeting, and then we'll make some recommendations to council on a final report. And, you know, I guess the idea would be to get that implemented toward the end of the year. Is that okay with you?
Sure, no, that sounds good. I think with respect to the policy work and everything else, it's probably just as easy to add it on as another tab and just update it as well. Just keep it updated along with the regular spreadsheet, and that way, you know, that way it's as up to date as the rest of it is. I think part of it is it's not going to change as much as the application spreadsheet will, but I still think that it's useful because there's a lot of initiatives in there that I think a lot of members of council are interested in. So I think it's just as easy to keep that as part of the spreadsheet as well. We would just do another tab. So
Beautiful. Okay, so I think what we'll do, Pat, I don't think we need a motion. I think we'll make this part of our final recommendation that'll come at the next task force meeting. And that'll be a sort of final, we want to bring a final report to council in November with final recommendations. So at the next meeting, Rebecca and I will write up, we'll write up a basic outline of a report. We'll make this one of the recommendations, and then the task force will have a chance to endorse it and go forward with there if that's what they choose to take forward to council. So we'll do that at the meeting in October. I've got the information here. We'll add the policy as another tab and then get it updated through the planning committee. So I'll bring that forward. If you're okay with that, Pat, then we don't necessarily need a motion. Does anybody object to that? Is everybody okay with that? And then we can discuss it when we have something in front of us at the next meeting. Perfect. Okay. Anything else, Bjorn? Are you good?
No, I think I'm good. It's just a matter of monitoring this program now, make sure it's working the way we think it should work, and hopefully think of better uses for the information that we have.
Sounds great. And thanks for your work on that. And certainly thanks to staff, Richard and Chris and your staff for banging away at that and working with us on it. So, okay, so we'll move over to item 9. We want to have a bit of a conversation, business recovery. Rebecca's done up, just let me get to it here. Rebecca's done up, she's way more organized than I am. She's done up a bit of a report. You can see my report at the back is just an outline. So the report is really an update on the working group sessions. We had some more working groups, working group session 2, scope down. She's got, I know Rebecca, I'm gonna let Rebecca speak to it, but she's got the working group results from the first in here, the first session. So there's a little bit of a summary on session 2. So I'm just gonna turn it over to Rebecca and let you speak to your report here, Rebecca, because this is what we're trying to implement into our final recommendations to council. So I've put the outline at the back that I'm looking for, not necessarily for the October committee of the whole, because I don't think I'm going to bring a memo. I think I'll just update them verbally, and then what we'll do is we'll work on an outline for the next committee or next task force meeting with final recommendations to go to council in November. Can't believe I'm talking about November, but we wanted to incorporate the second working group session into these results that I sort of printed out before that. So I'll let Rebecca speak to that. Go ahead.
Okay, so this is the second round of working groups that you have facilitated. The first one was in June, and there were 10 different groups. You wanted them consolidated, so we had 3 meetings. Tourism was held on a Monday, construction and innovation on a Wednesday, and then agriculture and industry on Thursday. Excuse me. Many of you were in attendance, and thank you for that. There was some very good discussion backwards and forwards. So I hope that is helping you as you go into your thoughts on what you want the action plan to look like coming from this task force. What we did here, to bring everybody back together, and for those that were not able to attend, we did hear some very similar information to the June working groups, but there was some new trends that have kind of established themselves in this area over the last couple of months, and I grouped them in the report. The first one around tourism visitors. There was noticeably a diversification of tourists that were coming to Kawartha Lakes from all across the GTA, and our tourism operators, including retail and restaurants, that whole group really noticed that the usual visitors had come up, but there are a lot more people that were up as well. And with a really strong interest in outdoor activities, and Jill can probably speak to this more around a real interest in getting on the water and some limitations that people have getting into the water. The second trend that we started seeing was resident opportunities, but remote work, incredibly evident, people coming up, working from their cottages. Our construction industry and our building department are noticing trends as cottages were becoming used for more permanent residences. There is a thought amongst the community that less people will be traveling south. So we might not lose the population that we typically would over the winter, which is an interesting trend for Courth Lakes thinking about recovery over the winter. And a lot of people in different groups talked around a real interest in volunteerism and more people coming out of the woodwork to volunteer at the moment. The third area that we started hearing about was business transformation, a real adaptation to process and products due to the impacts of the pandemic. So supply chain has been a very big issue. Obviously, restrictions on people not being able to come into stores has led to how people, businesses are changing, permanently potentially changing how they deliver their products and services. A real digital transformation is the other piece related to that. So our businesses are shifting in response to limitations that they have, but also new opportunities that they've found. And some of our businesses are actually thriving because they've found a real niche market that is addressing the needs of this pandemic. Having said that, a lot of others are struggling. So there has been a big shift in business. The three groups, I provided a summary in that report of what we heard in those three groups, a little bit different between all of them. But overall, what we did here was the themes that we heard in the first group still ring true for now. So broadband improvements are incredibly essential here. And we're talking about remote work, yes, but also cell gap across the municipality and the ability for businesses to be able to leverage good broadband. Even on the calls, we had people dropping off our Zoom calls because their internet connection wasn't good enough to maintain a business interaction in our working groups. Business development still remains key. A lot of our businesses who were growing were saying, I could really use some help in growing because I don't know what this brave new world looks like for me. So support, and we have a lot of training and support through our different organizations, CFDC, our Small Business and Entrepreneurship Center. They all exist to support business development, and the Courth Lakes ecosystem network that we have sat around the table at 9 o'clock this morning talking about ways to support businesses in that transition. Communications and marketing are still trends that are really important. So I've just made a note here around tourism, marketing, but also business and resident attraction. And there was a note made in the manufacturing, the agriculture and industry group talking about when we have new residential developments coming into town, it's great, but we don't necessarily have the jobs in the community growing at that same rate. So there is a real need for that. And then improvements in the development process, like we spoke about this morning, the importance of good municipal infrastructure and services. And the last area that we heard earlier and still rings true today is limitations in workforce, which are making our businesses change how they do business by adopting technology, or we're seeing businesses maybe not grow to their full capacity because there's limitations in the people that need to do the work for them to do that. So similar themes of areas of action, but also really interesting trends that we're seeing because the pandemic's been here for a little while, of changes to our economy that are impacting how we do things. And that's the summary.
Thanks, Rebecca. Appreciate that. Any questions for Rebecca on the summary of the different meetings? I know different folks participated. The one, yeah, I got you, Pat. The one I have, Rebecca, is Councillor Vale gave me a call. He couldn't make it today. He had another commitment, but he did say in the agriculture and industry meeting that there was a discussion about the need, you know, we go back to the workforce and you know, businesses struggling to get people to fill some of the job opening. They can't grow their business because they can't get people to work in them. And one of the conversations he says was had, and I don't see it in the summary here, was about transportation. Somehow I didn't get in that meeting, so I'm just looking for confirmation that, you know, is that something we should you know, we should get as far as a recommendation. So we start looking at options for, you know, a bit of a rural transit route from Pontypool to Lindsay to Bobcaygeon, or Peterborough to Bobcaygeon to Lindsay. Is that something that, you know, we could sort of put in our transit strategy moving forward, start looking at, and would that, you know, is that something that the industry and businesses are needing to try to get people who maybe don't have vehicle access, open up that workforce where people can commute a little bit easier? I mean, is that, you know, is that a legitimate comment? I don't see it here, so I just wanted to, he asked me to bring it up as part of the conversation. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, it was a comment that came up, and it was brought up by a number of employers. The discussion about GO service actually came up as well. If GO started in Lindsay and then went to Pontypool, that would help service the Pontypool Industrial Park. Of interest to this group would be that rural transit, when it has taken place previously, has really been around the consumer and getting someone to a shop. These employers are talking about getting people to places of employment. So the timing and the intention behind how that transportation takes place needs to have workforce as part of the consideration. Yes.
Yeah, we've been banging away on GO for a long time to, you know, try to get something to go from Lindsay, and it's just, they're focusing on the high growth areas right now. And, you know, we're not meeting that criteria at this point, but we've also talked about the Via Rail, you know, the possible long-term Via Rail connection through south of Pontypool. And, you know, and our need as we get funding for transit to, you know, expand our transit out a little bit. And I think I don't know how the rest of you feel, but I think it's a valid point that, you know, instead of just looking at it from a consumer perspective and, you know, so-and-so has a doctor's appointment, or they want to, you know, come into town to shop, you know, run a bus around the lake so many times a day, you know, we start focusing a little bit on the employment aspect of it. And if it's a couple of early morning runs, a couple of end of day runs, you know, between some of our different centers, then, you know, maybe that's something that needs to be explored. And if that helps out with our workforce challenges, then it certainly makes sense to me. I don't know how the rest, any comments on that portion of it. I would like to include that in one of the recommendations, that, you know, that be explored from an employment perspective moving forward. Does anybody object to that? Okay, Chris, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just a comment. I mean, I can see because there was a comment that, yeah, that people see the bus, you know, at certain times of day just going around empty, you know, and going long distances empty, especially, you know, going down to Pontypool or some of the outlying areas. But there's some other communities have done some very creative ways of expanding their transit. And I know that there's a community in the, just a sec, Shannon, can you stop? Shannon, can you stop? Sorry, my daughter's emptying the dishwasher right now. I know in the Simcoe, yeah, the Simcoe County, they've actually hired Uber to be their public transit system, and they found that it actually isn't that much more expensive, and people get and the Uber actually takes them to where the buses are running more regularly. So, but you know, for some of these outlying areas, it might make sense to do something like that, where you only take you know, the limited number of people that are going to those outlying areas by a different mechanism, rather than running a bus that way. But anyway, it may not be the same kind of transit system that we've had in the past. It may be a more creative or different form of transit.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think those partnerships, you know, when you have a municipality our size and you start having a discussion about, you know, running a city bus around our community and trying, you know, having somebody sit on a bus for 5 hours to get from one location, it's not feasible. It's not cost effective. It's not feasible. So to put some kind of a system in place, it'll have to be, you know, a combination. I agree, Chris, 100%, that it'll have to, you know, some partnerships will have to be formed. and some hub routes that we can expand to, that the partnerships sort of feed into those routes. So it is part of our transit master plan moving forward. I think it would be a good recommendation that we can put for the next meeting, to have that portion of the transit master plan accelerated, just based from an economic recovery perspective. It's probably got a little bit more of a onus on it right now than maybe it did before, from a consumer perspective as opposed to an employment perspective. So if everybody's okay with that, I'll bring something forward at the next meeting as part of the recommendations, to get that accelerated a little bit. So Pat O'Reilly, you had your hand up earlier. Go ahead, sir.
Just maybe through to Rebecca. I see under the tourism, you have virtual event platform. There's been a number of virtual event platforms, not only in our municipality, but in other municipalities. Do we have any kind of way of measuring outcomes, how successful these are? I realize it's early stages and whatever, but I see them happening, but I really don't know whether they're really going to be, I know people are trying to do things and with the COVID shutdown, but would you have a comment on that, Rebecca?
Yes, perhaps two ways to think about it. So we, through our regional tourism organization, are just wrapping up some virtual tours of museums that will go online. So while people can't go into the museums per se, they can go on, visit them virtually. That sort of thing will be able to easily track the number of people who are watching these things. Globus Theatre too is doing a show where they're hoping to do a show where they've got people coming into the theatre, but they're also streaming it live on Facebook. So anything that is virtual, we can count. That's part of the beauty of that. The challenge that these sectors are having is around revenue generation. So the question is whether or not we're going to see revenues increasing, because a lot of the online pieces seem to be free, and that doesn't help the sustainability of an organization. So I think we're going to see if it can be monetized. That'll be the key.
I guess just a couple local examples. I think the Bobcaygeon Fair and the Lindsay Fair are doing some virtual events, but I think now that whether we say it's a second wave or not a second wave coming with events now back to 25 people, I think who knows how that's going to play out. So thanks for that, Rebecca.
Yeah, and I think it's important that when we message that out, we're going back to less gatherings, but that's unmonitored gatherings at residences, not necessarily at community halls or churches or anything. Different facilities can put those protocols in place, but the new gathering limits will be where they're unmonitored, which is basically they're trying to cut down on the house parties where nobody has control, nobody's sort of monitoring what's going on. So that's the gist of that there. So I noticed, Rebecca, in your summary that you touched on the broadband in all first line of all three of the working groups, and I think we get the message, and it is obviously our top priority moving forward. CellGap is off and running through EORN. I mean, that's been approved. There's federal, municipal, and provincial money that's been approved. So their tenders are out. I don't know if the tender's been awarded. Private providers have bid on it. I know that, so it's looking good. It's going to be like everything else. It's just going to take time to roll out, right? But that should close that cell gap. I think the coverage was up to 95% across Eastern Ontario from 80% coverage that they have now. So it's a substantial amount of money, but it should make a big difference. And we're still working through EORN on the gig proposal, wire to every home in Eastern Ontario, and seem to be getting some traction with some of the different ministers and some of the different conversations we're having. But I don't want people to think next year everybody's going to have phenomenal broadband, because it's not going to roll out that fast. But the only way we can do it is to have these partnerships with every level of government involved. And unfortunately, when that happens, it takes time. Agreements have to be put in place, but everybody recognizes the need right across the board. So that's very hopeful. And when you start talking about billions of dollars for a project, then everybody wants to make sure they're dotting their I's and crossing their T's going forward. But I'm quite optimistic that something good's going to come out of this in the next little while, but we'll see. So any other questions on Rebecca's update on the summary of the either round 1 recommendations from the working groups or the summary from round 2? Thank everybody who participated or who listened in. Is there any other comments that we've missed that didn't get captured? Okay, then let's just, our last one, let's just flip over if we can. I don't know if you have it in front of you, or I do, but the outline that I put together for, I've said for the October 6th Committee of the Whole, but again, I'm not going to bring these recommendations forward to Committee of the Whole Council yet. I want to put them into a report format, summarize them with Rebecca with our strategic plans, and just make sure we've got a cohesive plan with some strong recommendations for council moving forward. And then my plan would be to get that to our next task force meeting in October, and then get that to Committee of the Whole at the beginning of November, with final recommendations going to council later in November. And, you know, and hopefully that's, I won't say that's a wrap up for our task force, but that sort of summarizes, you know, some of the discussions we've had. So some of the outline that I put together was really just current initiatives. I'm just going to go through it real quick and, you know, comment, put your hand up if you want to comment. I tried to capture, went back through all the working group sessions and tried to capture without sort of every single little point that somebody, you know, that somebody brought up, but tried to summarize it. Current initiatives in place for 2020. We have already opened up the community improvement plan for the full utilization of all tools if needed. That is now in staff's hands. We did allow patios and restaurants to expand into parking lots or sidewalks if they requested. I think that's something that we should seriously look at doing for next year as well. I don't believe that, you know, that come next year, everything's going to be tickety boo. So, you know, I'll incorporate that into the recommendations. I think it saves some of our businesses this year. And if they know next year we can do the same thing, we've got the same kind of flexibility. Oh, Juan doesn't like that idea, but at least we can let them know ahead of time that we're heading down the same path for next year, or we can ask council to consider that. Go ahead, Juan.
Oh, Andy, I think it's a great idea. I just wanted to make sure that, are you planning to waive, there is a fee, a small nominal fee that we waived this year. Are you planning to waive that for next year as well? And because that's, that would have to be approved by council as part of our consolidated fee bylaw, if there's an exception.
Yeah, I think we, council made that exemption this year, and I think we as a task force should certainly recommend, if we're going to expand the patios and give them another year, to carry on the waiving of those fees for next year as well. It's not a huge amount of money. I think there's several fees that we waived this year that we could probably look at making that recommendation. It'll be a council decision, but I'll incorporate it into into the report, into one of the recommendations, and then we can go through them at the next meeting and see if everybody's on board. But yeah. We also waived fees for parks, patios, and some events in 2020. Again, we'll have a discussion about doing that again for next year. Yeah, Jill, go ahead.
Is there an opportunity to have the patios open year round? Is there a reason that the patios are just a summer thing other than the weather? Or is there an appetite, no pun intended, for patios to stay open over the course of the winter?
Yeah, it's a great question. I know some places that don't get the winters we have, like Toronto and Windsor and stuff, are looking at keeping their patios going with heaters and stuff. I'll turn it over to Juan. I don't know if we have a patio season and why we wouldn't be able to expand it if somebody wants to do that, especially with the restrictions still in place for indoors gatherings. Then Juan, do we have some kind of end date on patios, or is it really up to the different businesses at this point?
No, when I got to the city of Kawartha Lakes in 2010, it was already established. It was basically from May to the end of October was the patio license agreement. How that came to be, I don't know. It was just what we inherited, I guess. We should have a conversation with Public Works, because a lot of our boulevards require snow storage. And if you had a patio there, they may not have sufficient room for snow storage. But again, that's more of an operational maintenance thing. So barring that and comfort level, I don't see an issue. But I would like to at least reach out to Public Works and seek their input.
Well, I think probably, and it's a great point, but I think the best way to go about it is if somebody wants to extend their, I mean, I've noticed some of the patios that have expanded have already pulled back to their original size just because the demand isn't there anymore for the bigger patio. You know, if they can keep those patios going, I think we just sort of on a one-off basis, like you said, we have no objections as a city, but you know, if somebody's utilized our sidewalk, full sidewalk to use a patio and they want to keep doing that all winter, it's going to be pretty tough when we're plowing snow. So it's probably, there's other situations where it doesn't impact it at all. So it's probably one of those things that if they want to request an extension of their patio, then, you know, our director and through Public Works can look at it and see if it's feasible to do. And if it's feasible to do, I think we're considerably open to that idea. Do you agree with that one?
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so we waived fees for parks, patios, and events for 2020. We did that. We deferred 3 property tax payments for 2020. Current exemption in place, which wasn't part of this task force, done earlier in the year for all industrial DC charges and up to 25,000 square feet for commercial DC charges. We didn't get a big rush on that in the spring for obvious reasons, but I'm hearing from a lot of different businesses looking to, you know, now looking to go back and expand, that this was a big reason for their expansion, and some of the growth things coming forward, new hotels and stuff, are saving a considerable amount of money, and know that this is, you know, this isn't a permanent thing as of right now. It's in place till the bylaw, I think for another year, 2 years, or a year and a half, until the new bylaw is in place, and then council can choose to go where they want to go from there. But we haven't had a huge uptake on it, but I expect over the next year that we will have a considerable uptake on that, because there's a lot of commercial people looking to do some building and business out there, and this will save them from an industrial perspective and a commercial perspective a considerable amount of money. Pat, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just a moot point, Andy, but I just wonder if we shouldn't put the date on that bylaw in the end of that, like 2022, just so people know. And we'll have to have a new or amended bylaw after that. But I just wondered if we just should put 2022. I believe.
I'll put a little more detail in there so everybody knows what the exact exemption is and when it expires at this point, or when the bylaw expires. And council can always choose to expand it to see where we're going. But I think council wanted to get some information back on, you know, who's taking advantage of it, because any DC costs that are exempted, we have to cover somewhere else in the budget. They're not waived. They're waived to the developer or the business, but from a tax perspective, we have to cover them off as DC costs and put them into that development charge reserve. So it's not free money. I mean, but it's a good investment in our community for jobs, property taxes in the future moving forward. So council was very much on board with that decision, and we just want to get some information back at some point on the uptake and see how successful it was. Tourism and shop local marketing campaigns have also been put in place, and I think for the most part have been quite successful this summer. Initially, to get people to come up, there was a lot of people around, and there still are. There's a lot of cottage lights still around lakes. There seems to be a lot of people that haven't gone back. I seem to see a lot more boats out on the lake than the weather's been quite nice, but I don't know if Jill, if you're seeing anything extending a little more than usual, but I seem to be seeing not just the snowbirds, but a lot of cottagers that have come up from the city haven't, certainly ones without kids, haven't rushed back at this point to get back to the city at this point. So they seem to still be here. And I think with the snowbirds, I want to say snowbirds if that's cliche, but the folks who usually go down south for the winter, a lot of them are going to be staying here for this year. And you know, they're going to need to do something. They're going to need to be active. They're going to want to shop. So I know from our perspective as a city, we're looking at, you know, utilizing some of our facilities for walking areas. You know, we want to make sure that our downtowns are kept clean of snow, and the sidewalks we maybe need to put a little extra attention to this year, just to recognizing maybe there's a few more people here in our communities that haven't traditionally been here in the winter time. So we'll see how that plays out. But Jill, are you seeing anything as far as an extension of the season or more people around than usual, or?
Yeah, I'm sure as long as the weather holds steady, we could book boats right into November. We're still getting phone calls daily with people wanting to get on the water. People who have their own boats are extending their season because they're working remotely. So there is an increased demand. But one thing I found interesting was in one of the working group meetings was the response from Fenland Falls saying that the streets were really busy, but it didn't necessarily translate into the fact that the stores were any busier because people are still reluctant or uncomfortable with, or whatever the motivating or lack of motivation is, they're reluctant to go into stores and spend the way they would have normally.
Yeah, no, fair point.
And our advanced reservations for next year are massive as well. Like we're already starting wait lists and we're already taking bookings for 2022. So people are looking at the long haul in this.
Good. Yep. And I noticed articles since, airlines that have booked flights, over the winter, expecting people to uptake in vacations and down south and such. They've now starting to cancel a lot of those flights because they're not getting the uptake they thought they might. So I think it goes to what we've talked about before, to the trend that, that this is gonna take a little while to get through and to get back to some kind of normal, as we've had those conversations with Tom, on where we're getting back to, but it's going to take a while to play out. There's no doubt about it. So those are some of the current, thanks for that, Joe. Those are some of the current initiatives that we put in place for 2020. Some of the requested budget considerations for 2021 that council consider from an economic recovery perspective: downtown Lindsay phase 3, that's already been approved in the early start, and the downtown Fenland Falls reconstruction. So we'll make that recommendation. That council consider an increase in garbage cans and frequency of pickup in our downtown areas and major parks for 2021. I think we should make that discussion going forward. I know it was part of the tourism working group. Speak up if anybody has a comment. I'm just going to slowly go through these, so don't be shy. That council consider increased signage and portable washrooms in our downtowns. We're not in a position to start building permanent washrooms at this point. The infrastructure cost to do those is just through the roof, construction costs, but there should be no reason why we can't put some portable washrooms around, and some signage, so when people are, visiting our downtowns, that there is some signage and some portable washrooms available, and take some pressure off some of our local businesses. So that council consider an increased investment in our boat launches for improved access, which is really just a tourism thing. We already have a program where I think it's $100,000 a year council puts forward, or staff put forward, for boat launches, and staff sort of pick the next 3 or 4 boat launches that need the most work, and we go ahead with that. It's really just a consideration: do we want to increase that investment and double our intake on the boat launches to promote the tourism, natural stuff that we already have? Also, that council consider an extension to the Kawartha Lakes Innovation Cluster pilot program to provide specific support for high growth businesses. These are all Rebecca's, so she added to my list. So that economic development strategy and sector-based strategies, destination development plan, agriculture and food action plan, cultural master plan, and downtown revitalization plans. That staff continue to support small business growth through consultation services and digital transformation support. I think we touched on that. And that staff implement the Skills Advance Ontario project for manufacturing and agricultural sectors. So I think some of those are some of the considerations that we can put forward for budget considerations for 2021. Ask council to consider those in 2021. There's not a whole lot of high ticket items there. So, those are good recommendations I think we can bring forward. Everybody's frozen on my screen, so I just want to make sure you can all still hear me. Can somebody just confirm that I'm not speaking to myself?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, you can hear me good? Okay, because all your pictures are frozen. So those are some of the budget considerations for 2021. I think the other one I'll fit into that is the acceleration of the transit master plan to look at the employment aspect of that from a outside of our urban area perspective. So I'll work that into whether that's a budget consideration, but certainly a recommendation we can do in the short term. Longer term recommendations that council continue to work through EORN and EOWC and support the Eastern Ontario 1 gig proposal for increased broadband capacity in Eastern Ontario. This by far is the #1 priority from an economic perspective in all working groups. We also talked about the last meeting, if the EOWC proposal doesn't play out as quick or as well as we want it to from a funding perspective, that council look at pursuing a made in Kawartha Lake solution and work with EORN as much as possible on a local solution to supply that gig or wire to the homes and businesses in Kawartha Lakes on a local level if it doesn't work out as well as we hope it will from an Eastern Ontario. Obviously, the Eastern Ontario is a more cost-effective solution, more people involved, but we don't, I think, want to put all our eggs in one basket. We need to increase our broadband capacity regardless. So I think that's a good long-term solution that we should bring forward. And again, if anybody has any comments or wants to just speak up. Increase housing stock across the city to improve and increase the workforce. That's already in motion, as you can see from our planning spreadsheet. Fill vacancies in employment and provide options for young working families. Market Kawartha Lakes for resident attraction to support the workforce needs of our business and new business investment. Work with Fleming College to help fill the labor market needs, trades, and et cetera. We've had that discussion. Continue to work to improve timelines and processes in the development department. The updated spreadsheet is being finalized. I think we'll take that out of the long-term process and just put it into the short, just really just an update because it's in place. We'll make some recommendations along with that regarding bringing it to the, adding the policy to it and bringing it, working it monthly through the planning committee. Concierge concept seems to be moving forward, so we'll get an update on that at our next meeting. So we'll update that as far as an immediate assistance. The goal obviously being better communication and flow between applicants and our staff. And if there's something, you know, I keep wanting to reiterate, and I know Bjorn keeps making the point that, you know, if staff feel we can do this, should do this differently, if your planners, not just you, Richard and Chris, but if your staff feel that there's a better way or something that should be added or something that we don't need, by all means, you know, we're not trying to tell people what to do. We're trying to be all inclusive here. And I know Bjorn has reiterated, and we all have, that the goal here is to you know, try and help your staff with their daily work activities. And can we better system in place that is better for our customers and better for our staff to focus on, you know, the amount of work that they have, which we know is a lot. So keep pushing, keep letting them know that, if you would. And advocate for the province for childcare and supply chain concerns that are needs to be addressed for stability of our workforce and inputs for local business. And I've just said these are core recommendations coming from the Economic Recovery Task Force, will be presented to council for their consideration, a final report in November. Is there anything, comments on any of those? Is there anything that we've missed that should be added? Chris, go ahead.
I'm just wondering about the sort of cultural, arts and culture side of things. And I mean, I sit on the board for the Academy Theatre, and I know that the Academy, the Little Theatre, the Globus Theatre, they're all, you know, close to the edge, I would say, in terms of, you know, survival. Is there any thought to providing some support for them financially? And I know, where do you stop when you start thinking about supporting people that are affected by the pandemic? But there doesn't seem to be any alternative grant opportunities or, you know, that we've looked into for these things. So I'm just wondering if there's any appetite for that kind of thing.
Well, no, it's a great comment. I mean, it obviously, when we talk about, you know, tourism and bringing people up and people working from home and more people, you know, living here, then I guess overall that's going to help, you know, with the arts and culture. And but from a financial perspective, we've set up a meeting with Tracy Richardson, Kathleen Seymour Fagan, and some of the arts groups, Chris, just to, you know, they have some concerns that they're sort of missing out. And, you know, one of my concerns is we keep saying we need to offer some support for our arts and culture and we certainly do, but it's kind of like, I keep going back to like what are you asking for? And, you know, we've got a little bit of a communication gap in, you know, in what's the plan moving forward? I mean, we're trying to take things from a city perspective, and anything we can improve on from a city perspective, I think is going to assist all those aspects. But I think the other side of that is we've identified arts and culture, you know, and heritage as a pretty big economic driver in our community, or the potential for being a pretty big economic driver. So how do we maximize that? You know, how can we guess our best bang for the buck, you know, by investing in that? And to simply say we need financial support isn't really giving a whole lot of, you know, a business plan or a request to this committee or to our council. So that's what I'm going to challenge the group with when we meet with them. I think it's next week, to say, you know what, we recognize the need, we know the importance, we know the potential of what you can bring to our economic recovery, but it's got to be more than just we need financial support. And it's, you know, it's what's the plan sort of moving forward to, you know, what's the payback on the investment, I guess, you know, for lack of a better word. And you know, and so we're going to challenge them on that and try to come up with a bit of a plan that we can bring forward. So I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on that part of it, but I don't. Yeah, Jill, go ahead.
My thought on that would be that, like, the supportive messaging for the arts industry, because how do people feel safe when for the most part the arts are a confined space experience? So what's the messaging going out to support that industry moving forward, that it is a safe thing to do? Because it is a safe thing to do.
Yeah, and I think it's a great comment. It's, you know, similar to our businesses that, you know, our businesses have bent over backwards to create a safe environment where people can go in and shop. And we need to get that same message out about, you know, the Academy Theatre and the Lakeview Arts Barn and, you know, the performances there. Don't be afraid to go visit. They've taken the proper steps to do it safely and you know, and properly, and sort of go from there. You know, so messaging is a big part of that. I've made a note, and we'll have that discussion with them when we meet with them, and I'll bring some ideas forward to the next meeting. But yeah, it's a valid point. It's just, you know, it's like everything else. I mean, they haven't been able to fundraise, you know, a lot of these groups, the grant opportunities are not what they used to be. So, you know, there's a struggle there, and we've certainly identified it as a community as a potential, you know, economic boon as part of what we take forward. So how do we invest in that to you know, to get that rolling, I guess, is the question. So thanks for bringing that up, Chris. I appreciate that. I did want to talk about that and I forgot about it. So thanks. Pat, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple quick items, Andy. Under requested budget considerations, number 4, council will consider investment in our boat launches. I think we had discussion around trails too at the same time. I don't know whether we just left that out, or because with the COVID-19, I think trails were for summer and indoor for the winter are certainly going to be a big item. And on number 5 in the long-term recommendations, I talked to Tom there just a little bit ahead for the meeting that working with Fleming College to help build labor markets. There may be some potential, we may be getting ahead of ourselves, but the long-term care home Victoria Manor may have to be replaced by 225, and we're going to have those conversations. So there may be some potential for Sir Sanford Fleming to be involved in that, or should be involved in that conversation.
Okay. Yep. Got it. I'll add trails to the boat launches for discussion as well. That's a great point. And the labor and Victoria Manor and everything else, innovation cluster. Yep. So we're good. Okay. Thank you for that. Anything else? Any other input, feedback? Mark, you think we're on the right track, Mr. Wilson? Pretty quiet there, buddy.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track. I also appreciated Chris bringing up the arts part of it. I know it's a tricky situation. Obviously my family has benefited greatly from things like the Academy Theatre. So I'm looking forward to somehow being able to see things happening there again in the not so distant future, for sure.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and there's a lot of potential there, and we just, you know, we need to have a good discussion, and, you know, how do we maximize that potential? And if we're looking at economic recovery, it's not just about, you know, our businesses. It's not just about tourists. It's not just about putting people in a boat on a lake. It's about the whole package. And when we talk about a quality of life, you know, the arts and culture and heritage is a huge part of that. So especially for people that, you know, either visit here or settle here. So we have some amazing people who are involved in that group and that committee who are very passionate, and we want to make sure that we're including them in the conversation. And if we've got a plan moving forward, we'll certainly make sure that that's part of the plan. So I'll have a further update for you on that portion of it at the next task force meeting. So any comment from you, Tom? Anything you want to add, or any feedback, or you feel we're heading down the right path here?
Oh, I think it's very much the right path.
Okay.
It's forward looking. Yeah, I've got no concerns at all. I think the college can play a bigger role in the future. There is a new labor market assessment tool that's being rolled out, in-house developed. I've never seen anything like it. It's brilliant. So that can help with labor market. And certainly, you know, there's already a long-term care facility on the Peterborough campus. Perhaps that's a model for a long-term care facility on the Frost campus.
Sounds good. Thank you. Any final comments? So if everybody's okay with that, I'll work with Rebecca. We'll summarize some of these notes, some of these recommendations. I just wanted to get them in front of you. We'll add a few of those comments. We'll get an updated spreadsheet for the next meeting to include, I think, some of the ones that are missed. We'll get a final report that the committee can, or the task force can mull over next at the next meeting. And then we'll target making some final recommendations and sort of go from there. So if everybody's, is everybody anybody object? Everybody comfortable with that? What do you think for another meeting? Just let me look at my calendar here. Next meeting, we're 22nd. What do you think, Rebecca, from a time frame to put all this together? We can just do one in October, and then that gives us time to formulate into a report for committee of the whole. So we have Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is the 12th. Really 3 weeks is the 13th. Is the Tuesday after Thanksgiving that create any problems for anybody? Or do you want to, 20th is a council day, so it's a little bit trickier on a council day in the morning for me anyways. But I wouldn't want to go any later. So is there any objections to the 13th, the Tuesday after Thanksgiving? You'll all be full of turkey and half asleep, but you know, hopefully that gives us something on the Tuesday. We'll get some information out to you beforehand so you can have a look at it ahead of time. And does anybody have a problem with Tuesday, the 13th of October? Okay, so let's target that. We'll get an invite out to you. We'll put an agenda together. Thank you very much for tuning in today. Appreciate it. And I guess I need a motion to adjourn. Mark, you okay with that? We'll adjourn, everybody. Thank you. Seconded by Tom. Anyone object to adjourning? Perfect. Thanks, folks. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Appreciate it.